I'm going to talk about the new program that was just passed with the Bipartisan Budget Act, the 2017 Wildfires, Hurricane, and Indemnity Program, which is referred to as WHIP. You can go to the next slide. And just to go over some signups began July 16th, 2018 for WHIP. Signups end November 16th, right? Right now, as of now, signups in November 16th, 2018. So this is a short program to sign up for. And this program is eligible in almost every county in the state of Florida, except for about 5, I think, up in the Panhandle. Do you want me to hold on for a second? Okay. Good to proceed? Okay. So WHIP assistance is available to eligible producers for crops, trees, bushes, and vines which suffered a qualifying loss because of the consequences of hurricanes Harvey, Irma, Maria, and other hurricanes and wildfires occurring in the calendar year of 2017 as implemented by decision of the Secretary of Agriculture. Loss includes production losses from eligible crops, inventory losses for value loss crops, which aquaculture is a value loss crop, tree, bush, and vine loss. This is the calculation for WHIP payment for value loss crops. The first step, we need to establish the WHIP value, which is your field market value A, which is the same as NAP, which is your beginning inventory immediately before the disaster. You take that times your WHIP factor, and my next slide will explain the WHIP factors and how they're established. You times that by your WHIP factor, and that gives you your WHIP value. The next step in the calculation is you take your field market value B, which is your ending inventory immediately after the disaster. You add any value of any ineligible causes of losses, and that equals your actual value of your crop immediately after the disaster. You take that and times your share times your payment factor. Payment factor would be if you didn't harvest your crop, an unharvested factor would be applied. Minus any indemnity payments received, which is NAP or crop insurance. We minus those from the WHIP payment calculation. You minus any secondary use or salvage value, and that gives you your total WHIP payment. This is our WHIP factor table. The WHIP factor is determined based on the level of coverage elected by the producer for the crop, type, intended uses, and planting periods. The coverage level, you look on the left side of the chart, and based on your coverage level of either NAP insurance or crop insurance, that gives you your WHIP factor. Can you see? Forms that must be completed by the producer to sign up for WHIP. This is the minimum requirement. There may be some other forms if applicable, but the minimum requirement is the FSA 890, which is a WHIP application form. This is not a manual form. This has to be done inside your county office. The FSA 890 is the crop insurance and or NAP coverage agreement, because with WHIP, which we'll go over later in the presentation, an insurance leakage requirement has to be signed and certified that you will keep that requirement. You will have to complete a 902, which you have to complete with NAP insurance, so you may be familiar with that, but that's your member information. A 902, which is the farm operating plan, which goes over the entity. information. You do have to complete an acreage report, which is the 578. You do have to complete the AD 1026, which is the highly erodible and wetland conservation certification. Eligibility and payment limitation. Adjusted gross income provisions are not applicable to WIP, so you will not have to complete what they call a 941 form, which is the 900,000 adjusted gross income provision. That's not applicable for WIP. There is a $125,000 payment limitation for all WIP applicants. There is an optional 900,000 payment limitation. And applicants can request this option. You can qualify for this 900,000 payment limitation if 75% of your adjusted gross income is derived from farming, ranching, or forestry. We will go over more of those requirements. So here's the requirements for the optional 900,000 payment limitation. You must prove that 75% of your adjusted gross income is derived from farming, ranching, or forestry. It's based on an average of taxable years 2013, 14, and 15. You must complete an FSA, a form FSA 892, which is a request for an exception to the WIP payment limitation of 125,000. You must have a CPA or attorney certification of compliance on this form. That certification can be done on the FSA 890, or the CPA or attorney can provide a similar statement that's acceptable to FSA, and there is a letter that the county office can provide you if the CPA or attorney doesn't want to complete the form FSA 892. This is the definition of income from farming, ranching, or forestry. I don't know if y'all can see that, but basically we want to capture the income reported on Schedule F or the IRS tax form 4835. This includes crop sales, livestock sales, income from cooperative distributions, agriculture program payments, commodity credit corporation payments, crop insurance proceeds, custom hire income, fuel tax credit or refund. Okay, like I mentioned before, there is a linkage requirement for WIP. As a condition of maintaining eligibility for WIP benefits, producers must obtain crop insurance or NAP. And I don't know if RMA is who covers crop insurance. NAP covers any crops that aren't federally crop insured. That doesn't confuse you. Crop insurance or NAP must be obtained for the next 2 consecutive crop years with respect to which crop insurance or NAP coverage is available after the 2017 WIP enrollment period ends, but no later than the 2021 crop year. So NAP crops, for the linkage requirements, you must obtain NAP coverage of at a level of at least 6,100 if available, including paying the administrative fee and filing an annual acreage report, or you can purchase the whole farm revenue protection plan, which is available, or it could be available through RMA for you. Like Brandy, I think Brandy mentioned, as of now, buy-up coverage is not authorized or available for 2019 NAP. So at this time, you can purchase basic coverage at 50/55. However, if you do sign up to receive WIP benefits, it is your responsibility to meet that minimum 6,100 coverage level if it becomes available. And like we said, you have until crop year 2021 to meet those 2 consecutive crop years of linkage at the 6,100 level. The linkage requirement applies to the producer's interest in the crop in the county where the crop is located. For NAP, it's the administrative county. It applies to each crop, intended use, and planting period listed on the approved WIP application. If linkage requirement is not met, the producer will be required to refund WIP benefits for the crop plus interest. There will be no exceptions or waivers to this requirement. An eligible producer, the county committee is required to ensure that the producer is eligible for WIP. The producer must be able to show with verifiable evidence that the producer had a valid ownership share and risk in the crop produced and control of the crop acreage on which the commodity was grown at the time of the disaster. WIP payments will be denied if the county committee is not satisfied that WIP payments claimed by producers are proper. Eligible aquaculture species for WIP are any species of aquatic organisms grown as food for human consumption. This is just the same as NAP. It's fish raised as feed for fish that are consumed by humans, or ornamental fish propagated in an aquatic medium. To be eligible for WIP assistance, eligible aquacultural species must be raised by a commercial operator on private property or in water and a controlled environment. Same as before. Okay, so for value loss crops, WIP assistance is determined by comparing the value of inventory immediately before the disaster to the value of inventory immediately after the disaster. This is the same as NAP. Like Randy explained earlier, the field value market A is the dollar value of the crop immediately before the qualifying disaster, and field market value B is the dollar value of inventory immediately after the qualifying disaster event. Determinations concerning the value of the loss for the crop on the unit must be made while the risk is unmarketable to the user. So calculating an eligible loss, natural mortality must be calculated and subtracted from the inventory before disaster, before establishing field market value A. The same natural mortality rates established for NAP will be used for WIP. In the NAP presentation. And applying payment factors, the state committee will establish unharvested payment factors for each type and variety of aquaculture species in the WIP handbook. Those have already been established. The WIP handbook refers to the NAP established unharvested payment factors and established crops. Question? Okay, so the question was to define the whole farm revenue protection. I'm not sure that's actually through RMA, Risk Management Agency, so you would probably need to contact a crop insurance agent to verify if it is eligible for aquaculture. Yeah, that's not through, correct, that's through RMA. If you cannot have NAP insurance, then yes, you are required. And if you can't get whole farm, then you are ineligible for WIP because you will not be able to meet the linkage requirements. Okay. Your question is if buy-up does not become available or prior to linkage. If it's not available, then you will not be required to write. The handbook reads, we are to purchase 6100 coverage if available. The Farm Bill should be getting tossed around right now up in Washington, so hopefully we'll get the answer soon. Okay, the question was, what counties in Florida are eligible for WIP? It's up in the top of the panhandle, the eligible counties. I should have brought a map. I apologize if I could. I know it's Escambia, Santa Rosa. Man, I wish I had my map. I might have it on my. everybody can see this. Yes, all the blue is eligible. I'll try to zoom in for you. Okay, we'll call this right next to the white. So I think is that goal? Okay, I know Escambia, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton. Am I right so far? Bay and Gulf, and is that Franklin? Okay. I'll try to repeat again so everybody hears. The ineligible counties for WIP are Escambia, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton, Gulf, Franklin. There was one more. Bay.
What color?
Yes. The sheet that has the green top, that is our information. And I can send you all those forms if you'd like me to. Want to distribute them? Any other questions? Okay, if I can remember how to. How about you can repeat your question.
Okay, so the question is most producers that have a loss from due to the hurricane, if they didn't lose at least 30 to 40, lost 30 to 40 or 50% of the crop, wouldn't turn in a loss because of the work associated with that. How are those producers going to prove that the losses that they've had are due to the hurricane?
Okay, so my first answer to that question would be you have to submit inventory records that are directly immediately after the disaster event. You have inventory records for immediately after the disaster event that shows your loss. You would, well, anybody, if you knew that you didn't have a 60% loss, you know that you have 20, 30% loss, you should have some sort of records showing that. It has to be inventory records. It has to be total inventory records. Yes. It's the same as NAP. I mean, it's exactly the same as NAP. Whatever you have to do for NAP for records and losses is what you have to do for WIP.
I'm just asking, but it seems to me you'd take your seed purchase, less allowable normal loss, and then take what you sold, your sales for that period.
Would your sales include all your inventory, anything that you haven't harvested? Because it has to include everything. Yeah, it's your total inventory. It's the same as NAP. I mean, is that not what they?
The difference with NAP is when you file a loss, we send out a loss adjuster. They pull the bags and they take a sample they pull 5 or 6 bags and they take a sample and they average that across your whole inventory. So, correct. Correct. We will get further clarification from the national office on what is and isn't acceptable, but at this time, all we have is inventory records. So, I mean, you can pretty much turn in anything to prove it. The county committee will look at whatever you turn in.
Okay, so my next question is, excuse me. How do we prove a loss from the hurricane exactly?
Or do you have to prove the loss? I think that's the answer to this question. No, you're eligible.
Man, this is good. Wish I had my chief here with me. He gets paid the big bucks. If you're in an eligible county, you're eligible for WIP. If the county committee cannot determine that your crop was affected by the hurricane, that is a question. That's something that the county committee, if you had NAP and you didn't file a NAP loss, that application has to go to the county committee, and that county committee is going to question, okay, why did this producer have NAP? They did not file a loss from the hurricane, but they're claiming a hurricane or a loss for WIP. So I'm sure there's going to need to be proof to prove that the crop was damaged and lost due to the hurricane. Okay, his question is, how do you prove that the clams, aquaculture, were damaged by the hurricane?
Normally, we look at the weather data, but in this situation, now on the other coast, they had massive storm surge over there. Over here, we had just the opposite. So it's, how do you know that the hurricane actually is what caused your loss? See, that's not for us to determine. That's for you to prove. And you're going to have to convince the county committee that the hurricane is the reason that you have your loss.
Probably quite a similar situation. It was the following year, and he was right out there a few days later, and he actually sampled different bags from the blockhead plant, come up with a number.
And that's what we normally do for NAP. Anytime you file a NAP loss, but a big question is going to be, why didn't you file a loss for NAP if you had this big of a loss? Anyway, I get you're saying that you didn't have enough of a loss to apply for NAP. But again, that's up to you to present to the county committee.
Okay, I know, but we do have people participating.
So as an example, like during a hurricane, you have tornadoes and stuff touch down. We had tornadoes touch down all around Cedar Key. How can anybody tell us that a tornado didn't touch down on your lease, so to speak, and damage your crop? Or how can you say that when the tide starts to come back and you have waves busting on your bags that it doesn't bury your clams, or necessarily, wash your seed to one side of your bag and start killing your crop that way? I mean, you might not lose 100% of it in that particular situation, but you might lose a portion of it. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of different factors that come into play when it comes to any kind of storm hitting our area, whether the tide, I mean, we had Hurricane Francis do the same thing back in, I think, 2004, where it drew the tide out and some of the worst damage we had to crops. Also, you have the fact that, you know, you have clams being exposed, you know, 100% out of the water for a long period of time. You know, you're going to have losses from that too. Just like when we take our seed out of the water and leave it out for a long period of time, you have more losses due to that. So our goal, you know, as farmers is to get clams back into the water as fast as possible when we're changing them out. So those are some of the different, you know, issues you may encounter.
It still goes back to the fact of, if you had that big of a loss, why didn't you file for NAP? When it could be proved, because we could have sent loss adjusters out to pull your bags and look at them at that time and determine whether or not you had a loss.
But that goes back to the same thing I mentioned before.
It depends on what coverage.
That's just the nature. You know, they lost 50% of their crop. They're not going to call it because they know they're not. That's expected. I mean, I wouldn't call it. You know, because now you big ass too, because
What will coverage?
you just never know. Like you mentioned, thanks for the thank you to the citrus farms. Sorry,
John.
I don't have anything to say. I'm just still going to how y'all gonna board will accept it. That's the deal. We can sit here and talk and circle all we want, but if everything we turn in for eyes, it's a waste of time for us. That's all I have to say. Just trying to figure out how we can.
Each lease is different. I bought
Together as a
clams from
community.
2 people that
So could you have records where you have, so can we just do this one at a time? Because that's not fair to the folks that have are participating remotely. So we'll get to you. One thing I don't think I heard in the NAP presentation, are you now requiring growers to submit verification of their seed purchases? Did I hear that?
That is something that the Gilchrist-Dixie-Levy County Committee is requiring. But other counties, I can't speak for other counties, so I don't know.
So if you're,
I was just saying, any county committee can request any documentation they feel needed to prove any inventory, production records, anything.
so if you have your seed records from that year and this year, any year, and you have to have them, as you well know, because you're required through the DAX audit. So you have those. You have your receipts from your wholesaler of the clams that you sold. I mean, that's what you're going to do with your clams. You're going to sell them, and you have those records. Can those records document that there's a loss based on seed planted versus harvest versus the normal loss, etc.? Would those be adequate documents? She did. Where was I?
That question has went up to the national office.
So that I'm going to get to you. I am. So that, let's go this way. So that question has already gone to the national office, and what did they say?
They said that immediately after the disaster is what we take into consideration for the loss.